Test. So yeah, looks like I'm good. Okay. I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology Podcast, where the world, the humans in it, and God are all wilder than we've been told.
That's your intro?
So, you'll get philosophy and theology and crazy stories that come from 30 years of pastoring.
Boring.
20 years of festival work.
Whatever.
And the mud and blood of wrestling with the living in spaces angels fear to tread.
Ooh, trying to sound interesting, are we?
Oh.
Yeah, you think you got something to say?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, dimwit.
Look, I'm a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, you tightened your shoes this morning.
Whatever. We're Phil Wyman, and this is Wild Theology, where you get to argue with your own ideas.
And lose.
That's the point. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Phil Wyman. This is Wild Theology, Episode 18, Love Big or Go Home, Part 4. In the previous 3 episodes of Wild Theology, I described spiritual wayfarers and the different forms of nomadic religious movement. Some, like Abraham and St. Patrick, heard a voice and responded to a call to go. Abraham left home in simple obedience to the voice of God. Patrick left his homeland on a lifelong mission to spread the gospel among the Irish. Some fled persecution and the difficulties of the times and places they lived. The Christians of the early church in Jerusalem were scattered across the Roman Empire by persecution, and they took the message of Christ's gospel with them. Others fled the promiscuity and hedonism of the times. Women joined the ranks of spiritual travelers in the first 7 centuries of the church, and often were fleeing arranged marriages or seeking to devote themselves to God as virgins in a sexually oppressive culture. This expression of sexual abstinence as spiritual devotion was inherently countercultural and subversive in the hedonistic Roman Empire, and women were martyred because of their decision to follow God in this way. Saint Agatha of Sicily was supposedly put to death around the year 251 because of her profession of faith. She devoted her life to living as a chaste virgin for God. In doing so, she rejected the advances of a nobleman and was cruelly martyred. This kind of abuse at the hands of Roman authorities appears to have led to a growing vagrant population among Christian women. Wandering took on dimensions of both seeking and fleeing. On the one hand, holy men and women fled the hedonism and temptations of a world they did not want to live in. They also fled the persecution coming to their still embryonic religion. On the other hand, they ran into the wilderness to seek the face of God they wanted to worship and emulate. These examples give us 4 primary patterns of spiritual nomadism. 1. Those who fled persecution and social pressure. 2. Those who searched for God through devotion, seclusion, and transient vagrancy. 3. Those who sought answers by searching out the isolated sacred places and the devoted masters found in those sacred places. And 4. Those who traveled to spread the gospel to the world. All 4 of these nomadic expressions are legitimate patterns of spiritual travel. In some cases, people traveled for a day or a weekend, like those who went to see John the Baptist in the wilderness of Judea. Some, like Egeria, mentioned in an earlier podcast, would travel for months or years. Some merely traveled by necessity and relocated to safer places, but others made a lifelong occupation in their nomadism. The definition of nomadism I'm using here is both literal, like that which is found in the ministry of Christ and the life of the Apostle Paul, and it is figurative. In the figurative sense, I'm suggesting, similar to Augustine, that we should live our lives holding our possessions loosely. Yet I want to take Augustine's figurative model a step further. There's a need for nomadic escape and nomadic mission in each of us. Today, people pilgrimage to festivals and tourist destinations in retreat and to do what we have called finding ourselves. Others go on adventure trips to find a vitality of life not available in their workaday existence. Others still travel to foreign places in service to others and to bring hope in hopeless settings. These expressions of leaving home represent part of the figurative nomadism I believe that we should each find a place for in our lives. And this forms a basic argument in these podcast segments that there is something about nomadism that is fundamental to human experience and to the mission of God, and we all can learn and gain from it. Now, homeless disenfranchisement, I believe, is a model of human existence. Jesus saw the crowds and had compassion on them because, quote, they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. That comes from Matthew 9, verse 36. People are searching. Some are searching for meaning. Some are searching for fulfillment and success or fame. Some are searching for the panacea of happiness. Many are searching for themselves as though they have been lost and separated from their own minds and bodies. When we look across the landscape of social experience, it appears to be an almost frantic search, and there are people taking advantage of the frenzy by offering solutions for almost anything you might be looking for. Apparently, Jesus could read the heart of the society around him. He was able to glance across the crowd and identify a prevalent struggle within the social fabric of his time. People then were like people now, without direction and searching. He somehow heard their bleating, shepherdless hearts as he scanned the towns and villages. Philosophers, psychologists, and theologians have identified this search and have tried to define it, often being as driven as the rest of us for an answer. Augustine of Hippo described the wandering ways of the human heart. Quote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Blaise Pascal would later echo these same thoughts. Quote, "What else does this craving and this helplessness proclaim but that there was once in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace? This he tries in vain to fill with everything around him, seeking in things that are not there the help he cannot find in those that are, though none can help, since his infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object. In other words, by God himself." Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed that humanity had strayed from its primeval noble beginnings. To Rousseau, civilization itself had created the angst we have come to experience. If we could return to the simple ancient beginnings as noble savages, we would find ourselves living in the manner our hearts so yearned for. Freud saw the drive of the human heart as a search for pleasure. Nietzsche believed the human drive was a passion for power. Kierkegaard saw it as a search for meaning. As the father of existentialism, Søren Kierkegaard believed that our quest was birthed out of a sense of human lostness, and he formed his ideas through his own personal struggle of feeling disengaged from God. He appears to have been a tormented soul, struggling with the feeling of a lack of forgiveness. This same guilt was also found in his father. Søren's father believed that the wrath of God was upon his life, and this seems to have chased Søren throughout his life as well. Every generation of people and every nation on earth appears to experience this struggle. Even if our feet are not traveling, our hearts and minds are often in various stages of being lost. We are nomads at heart. We are all searchers and wanderers in some respect. We are the disenfranchised, the lonely, and the misunderstood. There is a homelessness in the human heart, and it is found in each of us. Paradoxically, physical homelessness and this lostness do not exactly correlate, which reminds us of Tolkien's famous and now overused and slightly misquoted line from The Lord of the Rings. Not all who wander are lost. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The poem, All That Is Gold Does Not Glitter, is a prophetic announcement in the form of a riddle about Strider, the nomadic wanderer who is heir of Isildur and to the thrones of Gondor and Arnor. In similar fashion, Christ the King was a wandering vagrant during his time of ministry. Jesus modeled living as one who is disenfranchised from this world but connected to an internal and an eternal stability, and in a deeper sense, he lived that life in order to deliver us from it. His poverty was our richness, and similarly, his displacement can be considered to be our placement. It would not be ill-advised to fill the spaces of Paul's words about Christ becoming poor for our sake with words about homelessness. From 2 Corinthians 8:9, that's slightly adjusted. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was well placed, yet for your sake he became homeless, so that you through his vagrancy might discover your place. Viktor Frankl observed the paradox about lostness and displacement during his imprisonment at Auschwitz. In Man's Search for Meaning, he describes how there were prisoners who lived with such character that they appeared as if they were free, while there were camp guards who exhibited the behaviors of trapped men. Some men had found meaning without temporal stability, and others could not find it despite being on a winning side. Frankl's assumption that the search for meaning was at the heart of the human condition became the source for the school of psychology he founded, called logotherapy. Many of today's best-selling books target this human search for meaning and take advantage of the searchers. A new paradigm for living or a program guaranteed to unleash your potential seems to appear on the bestseller list in every season. We are addicted to our utopian hopes. This frenzy of interest in the empire of self-help information it has created seems to be, at the very least, strong circumstantial evidence that there is a hole in the heart of humanity and we are trying to fill it. We dish out billions of dollars each year to listen to people persuading us that we can do anything we want if we put our minds to it. But when we do not quite reach that goal of becoming a millionaire, ascending the pinnacle of business world, accomplishing our artistic dreams, or becoming president, we grasp frantically for the next book, which, as Steve Salerno points out in his book, Sham, How the Self-Help Movement Made America Helpless, the publishing industry knows we are likely to buy within 18 months of the last book we read on the same subject, with the same author. In the third book of his academic trilogy on the development of human consciousness, Morris Berman talks about this addiction and suggests that we need to create 12-step programs and halfway houses, quote, to help these people break the grip of a new paradigm addiction that, like drugs or alcohol, provides them with short-term ecstasy while robbing them of their real life, unquote. Though I feel, as Berman does, that American society in particular is addicted to the next new thing to improve our lives, I do not feel that the solution is the almost Rousseauian return to noble savagery. Although Berman says he's not promoting Rousseau's ideas, he edges ever so close to them, believing that we will find our footing or discover our place in life by returning to a primitive conceptualization of the world, akin to that which was supposedly found in hunter-gatherer societies, assumes that human beings are inherently stable and the search is either meaningless or return to our true selves. But historically, generation after generation and philosophical school after philosophical school returns to this search for meaning, and it has always been an extreme minority, typically of the intelligentsia, that prides itself in trying to prove that this metaphysical search for meaning is a worthless search. The majority of humanity maintains an honest dose of feeling disconnected from deep meaning, and it would appear that it is not remarkable to believe that we start our lives with some inborn sense of feeling lost. Coming back to nomadism, it seems then that those who disengage themselves from the things that bind them to this world are typically expressing their belief in another world or an existence outside the current reality we live. Just as it is true that being homeless does not necessarily correlate to being lost, it is also true that having a stable living situation does not correlate to having discovered the answers to life or finding your place in the world. Stories of success are peppered with examples of people achieving their dreams but losing themselves. It is rare to find stories of people who discover themselves and in doing so see their successes as worthless in comparison to their personal discovery and inner peace. One of these stories may have played out on the international scene just recently. The recent heavyweight boxing fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder gives us a story that looks like the journey of a lost heart. Former heavyweight boxing champion Tyson Fury beat the long-reigning heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko in 2015 to temporarily become the undisputed champion of the world, but soon afterwards fell into deep depression. Success did not match happiness, and his mental health deteriorated. Over the next few years, he spiraled into cocaine abuse and reached almost 400 pounds. After almost 3 years out of the ring, he finally returned in 2018 and credited his year of successful training and coming out of depression to the young trainer Ben Davison and to a relationship with Jesus. The comeback reached an exhilarating peak in the controversial draw decision in the fight with the WBC heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder. A majority of boxing experts saw Tyson winning the fight and being robbed in the decision. He was knocked down in the 12th round, and to all eyes, it looked like he was out cold. But 8 seconds into the countdown, he suddenly sat up and popped to his feet in a manner reminiscent of the drama of The Undertaker in WWE wrestling fame. This moment appeared to be indicative of his overall comeback story. Despite the drama of the world heavyweight title, something which is viewed as the pinnacle of the sports world, Tyson Fury is noted for having said that the prize he desires most is, quote, going to heaven, unquote. This is a recent story, not unlike many others that highlight an individual's struggle with depression, emptiness, and a host of unhealthy addictions, despite the fact that they have achieved their life goals. Rock stars and international bankers commit suicide. Movie stars struggle with depression. Those who seem to have the world wrapped around their fingers are often being crushed by its grip. Tyson Fury's story is a dramatic example of my point that success, fame, and finding our so-called place in the world are not the same thing as true fulfillment. Interestingly, Tyson Fury comes from an Irish traveler family. This traditionally nomadic people group often finds their home in this world not in a specific locality or in the ownership of a home, but on the road. Much like the Christian nomads of ancient Rome, the Irish travelers in the Roma are often misunderstood and categorized as criminals simply because they do not have an address. Tyson Fury is a man who seems to understand that success in this world is not necessarily true success, and a home in this world is not necessarily a true home. His ability to detach his ego from boxing success is more of a sign of his mental health than his ability to get off the canvas and fight to a draw in the 12th round of a heavyweight fight against boxing's heaviest puncher. The real strength of any individual is not found in the wealth accumulated, the fame achieved, or the successes accomplished. Real strength is something deeper, and it is something mysterious, which is evidenced by the fact that every generation continues to search for it and seems to have a limited number of examples that become true role models for reaching the ultimate goals. I'm convinced that examples like Tyson Fury are classic stories of accomplishment through a strange, paradoxical combination of surrender, discipline, and faith. Thank you to Dr. DK for the background music which you heard today, which is Reflections. And if you want to find more of his music, you can find it at drdk.bandcamp.com. If you'd like to support this project, you can do so here on Patreon for as little as $1 a release. And at the most, that's $4 a month.
Why on earth would anybody want to support us?
Well, I think we're pretty cool, and maybe some people believe in what we're doing.
Oh, come on, you believe that?
Yeah.
Don't you ever think you're just a little too weird for the average person?
Yeah, sometimes.